Hey everyone, my name is Matt. Welcome to my shop and welcome to episode 9 of my Ask Matt series, where I answer questions suggested by you, the viewer. Now we got a lot of questions about hand planes, how I set them up, how I sharpen them, and I guess how I use them as well. So today we're going to go through and I'm going to show you how I set up my hand planes, and we're going to use my number 4 here. Now I'll just preface this with, I'm not a hand plane master. I don't know a whole lot about hand planes, or I don't use them a whole lot in my work. I use them more for finesse work, so I don't use my planes for milling a whole board from scratch very often. I've only done that a couple times. So the way that I have things set up really works well for me, but if you're really interested in learning more about hand plane usage, there's plenty of other resources there as well. But this should give you a pretty good primer on how to get to where I'm at, where I grab a hand plane whenever I want to make a quick adjustment. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start off by sharpening this plane, and then we'll go on to how I actually set it up and do some planing. So let's head over and do some sharpening. Alright, so it's been about a year since I actually sharpened this plane, and that is probably because this is one of those upgraded irons from Veritas. So it does hold an edge really well. This is the A2 blade, and I guess based on how much I use my planes, that's pretty good. I haven't sharpened it, I haven't touched it up or anything for about a year. So let me go ahead and take this apart. Take the chip breaker off. And I got the blade. Now this is going to be pretty familiar if you've seen my sharpening videos for chisels. It's going to be pretty much the same exact thing. So I got my stone here. Since the bevel is already polished, it's actually really well polished already. All I need to do is just sharpen the very tip of this blade. And to do that, I'm just going to start with my 4,000 grit stone and then hit it with my 8,000 grit stone, and then it should be good to go. So the first thing I want to do, since this is a hand plane and it's really wide, is I want to make sure my stone is nice and flat. So the first thing I'm going to do is flatten the stone here with my diamond plate. So you can see, as I'm flattening this, I actually have a low spot all through the side here from the last time I used this stone. So I need to keep going and get this thing nice and flat. Since I don't really care what the angle is personally, I'm going to use my honing guide. I'm going to put my blade into it, and then I'm going to set the protrusion on the guide so that just the tip of the blade is contacting the stone. So I'll just do that by eye. I'll use my diamond plate since that's nice and flat. I'll just set it down, and then I'll rest my jig on here and I'll adjust it until I get the tip just touching the stone or the plate here. Alright, so now I can start sharpening. The first thing I do is I just like to rub the back a little bit just to clean it up, get rid of any kind of burr that might be there for whatever reason. And again, this blade's already been polished, it's been ready to go. So this is really just a quick sharpening. This is not a restoring a hand plane blade for sure. So I got the back, a little bit of touch up on the back, and now I can start working on the bevel. So I'll put the roller onto the stone, tilt the blade down, and then I'll put my index finger, my middle finger, and my ring finger all on the blade, and I'll apply even pressure to both sides and come forward. Now the key thing here, or the main thing here that I'm trying to do, is maintain even pressure across the entire blade so I don't end up with a curve in the blade or some kind of weird geometry. Now I'll take a few passes here and I'll check the progress. And I can see here that I have a few fractures in the blade itself. My first indication was if I was looking at the stone, as you can see a whole bunch of these little lines in here. See all those little lines? That's all from the blade going like this. It's got basically a sawtooth thing going on at the tip. So I'm going to keep honing and get past that. So you can see where I'm polishing. Actually, you can really see it on the camera. I'm really surprised. You can see just the little tip here is where I'm polishing right now. And the other shiny area back here is where the bevel used to be. So that's nice and polished. I got rid of the little sawtooth pattern. So now I can go up to my 8,000 stone And I'll just knock off the burr on the back of the blade here before I move on. There we go. Same thing here, I'll just flatten it before I use it, just to make sure it's nice and flat and ready to go. All right, now same exact thing. And then I'm going to remove the burr. And this blade is really ready to go. Now how about camber? I know a lot of people ask me how much camber I put on my blades, and for me I don't put very much on at all because I don't do a whole lot of final surface prep with my smoothing planes. So what I do is just put a very slight minor camber on both sides. If you're not familiar with camber or what that concept is, basically you're creating a round shape to the blade so that when it's in the plane, the corners don't dig in and leave plane tracks in your board. So you're really looking to put enough camber on it just to get the corners of the blade back the thickness of the shaving you're trying to take. So in my case, I'm not really taking really thick shavings. I'm not doing a whole lot of milling, so a lot of my shavings are going to be really thin, maybe 1 or 2 thousandths of an inch thick. So all the camber I really need is 1 or 2 thousandths per inch on both sides of the blade. And I learned this trick from Rob Cosman. So it's the same way as you would normally do it. You have your blade in the jig, and instead of applying firm pressure on both sides of the blade, just apply pressure on one side through a couple strokes and then switch over and apply pressure on the other side. So I'm still going to use my other hand to stabilize it. I'll be pushing with this one, but I'm just going to push the blade along, applying pressure to the right side for about 4 strokes there. The same thing on the other one. I'm just kind of put pressure on the other side and go forward. About 4 strokes. And that really should put all the camber I need onto the blade. So this blade is all ready to go, and now we can talk about setting up the plane and setting the chip breaker. And for the chip breaker, you want to basically set this thing as close to the edge as possible if you're going to be taking a really fine shaving. Now there's different ways you can kind of jig this up to get a consistent offset here. I like to eyeball it. It's not much at all. Just really as close to the edge as I can get it without touching maybe a, I don't know, like 128th from the edge. Just get it all nice and lined up. Just a little bit of the blade past the chip breaker there. Not much at all. Now the next thing that we'll look at setting up is the frog. And the frog is the piece in the plane that actually holds the blade. And you can adjust that forward and backward to basically make your mouth, the opening in the bottom, bigger or smaller. And I have mine set to maybe a, I don't know, like a medium-ish setting. You're going to want a bigger mouth opening. If you're doing a rough board, you want to take a bigger shaving because that shaving needs to be able to pass through the mouth. Otherwise, if you're trying to make a really thin shaving, you want that mouth to be as small as possible, just wide enough for that shaving to slip through so that the front of the plane supports the fibers as you're making the cut. But to adjust that, it's going to be different on the plane you have, but on mine, there is a screw on the back that you can actually turn to adjust that mouth forward or backwards. And then there are some locking screws inside the plane to actually lock it down. So the next thing we want to do is adjust the plane blade so that it's parallel with the sole. And to do that, I'm going to advance the blade out of the sole, or out of the, past the sole, so I can see it. It's actually in perfect alignment still. Yay! So I'm going to knock it out of position by moving this lever on the back, and that'll tip it left or right. Now I see that the blade is further out on the left side here, so I'll push the lever to the left, and that'll tip the blade and move the left side up into the plane. There we go. Now I can retract the blade all the way. And now I can hammer it to the bench and make some test shavings. So I have a piece of scrap here, my bench, my vise, and I'm going to set the depth of cut on the plane. And to do that, I have the blade fully retracted, and I'm going to start making passes with the plane, increasing the protrusion of the blade until it starts making a cut, and then we can see how even the cut is and all that fun stuff. I'm just turning it maybe 1/8 of a turn per pass here. And there we go. We just started to get a little bit of a shaving there. So I'll advance it just a little more. So it seems to be cutting. So now what I'm going to do is check to make sure that it is parallel. And a quick way to do that is just to make one pass on one edge. Take a shaving like that. Save that shaving. I'll use this side. And then compare the two and see how similar they are in thickness. If you have a caliper, you can check with the caliper if you want. But I like eyeballing things. And that looks pretty good. So I know my blade is set parallel, so now I have a nice setup plane. And yes, I'm planing backwards here because, you know, filming reasons. Woo! Woo! Shavings. So that's how I set up my hand planes. As I said, I don't really use hand planes a whole lot for a lot of surface prep. So cambering and different size shavings and things like that aren't really things that I personally have to worry about in my own work. Really all I'm doing with my planes is finessing things and using them here and there for different, you know, light duty tasks. So there isn't a whole lot of need for me to have different blades at different angles and things like that either. So thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments about anything I talked about today with the hand planes or anything else here in my shop, please leave me a comment. As always, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And if you have any topic ideas for future Ask Matts, please leave those as well. I love to make great videos about things that people are really interested in. And if you have a really burning question, you're wondering how I do something or what I use or whatever, leave me a comment, let me know, and I'll make a video about it. So, thanks as always for watching, and until next time, happy woodworking.